So many people ask me, how much money do I need to retire? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, there is no magic number. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the concept of 4% rule, what it means towards your journey to financial independence, and what are the key things that you need to keep in mind if you follow this so-called 4% rule. Before I do that, a quick introduction about myself. So my name is Yogi, and my wife Seema and I, we both achieved financial independence and retired early before the age of 50. And to celebrate that, we are on this one-year world trip, and that is what brings us to this lovely, sunny San Francisco, a bit chilly, and that's where you see this gorgeous Golden Gate Bridge behind me. So back to the topic. What is 4% rule? Well, 4% rule helps you determine your own customized, tailored number for your financial independence. So in a sense, what this rule means is that if your total wealth, which is your total investments, your savings, everything put together, if you withdraw 4% of that every year and you adjust it to inflation, you should be able to live securely without ever running out of money. So to illustrate, let's assume that you have $1 million or million euros or million rupees, and that's the beauty of the 4% rule, that it doesn't, it's not linked to a particular currency. So let's say you have $1 million. So that means that you can withdraw 4% of $1 million, $40,000 every year, and not run out of money. And you can adjust this to inflation every year. So let's say the same $1 million, 40,000 withdrawal on an annual basis. And on that 40,000, let's assume that there is an inflation of 5%. I hope this is not a consistent inflation that you have, that it goes down over a period of time. But let's, for illustration, say it's 5%. So that means that you add $2,000 on top of that $40,000 for the next year. So that means that for year one, you withdraw 40, year two, you withdraw 42, and year on year onwards, you keep adding and accumulating the inflation of that year onto that, and you keep withdrawing money. And this withdrawal could be either from the passive income that your total portfolio generates in forms of rentals, dividends, etc., or from your total sum capital of your total portfolio, the wealth that you have. So that's, in simple terms, the 4% rule. You may say, hey, I do not know what my total portfolio is or will be in coming years, but I do know my expenses. Well, you can flip this and you can say, hey, if my expenses every year is, say, $40,000, you multiply that by 25 times, which is basically the opposite of 4%. And that means you need $1 million of a total net portfolio to sustain your expenses. So in a sense, this rule helps you determine your total portfolio, desired portfolio, if you know your expenses. Or if you know your total desired portfolio, then it determines the expenses. And that's the beauty that is, as I mentioned, that there is, it works for all kinds of numbers. So you may, if you have an expenses of, let's say if you have a portfolio of $10 million, that means you can withdraw $400,000 and have an expenses of $400,000. Similarly, if you say, hey, my desired expenses every year is $400,000, that means you need a portfolio of $10 million. So this is 4% rule. So use it to calculate and see that what is your total net portfolio target or your net expenses target. And in the FIRE community, this 4% rule is called the safe withdrawal rate, so SWR. So some consideration of this 4% rule that you need to keep in mind if you do follow the logic of this safe withdrawal rate of this 4%. Consideration number one, it assumes or it is calculated net of taxes. So you will need to make sure that you understand what the tax impact in your country or city that you're living in is on towards your capital gains, your wealth, or any returns that you have. So for example, in certain expensive cities, and one of the cities that I lived in, the total tax rate is 50%. So that means that for me to have a net of 4% on a portfolio would have been 8% of return, so the gross, so that I can net withdraw 4%. So you need to keep that in mind, that it assumes that this is net of taxes. The second thing you need to keep in mind is that the inflation that you put in this every year is the regular market inflation. So the inflation that is linked to the index that you find defined for your city or the country. It does not keep in mind your lifestyle inflation. So if, for example, the regular inflation is 3 to 4%, but your lifestyle inflation is probably 50%, then this rule will probably break at some point. So in a sense, you will have to manage your lifestyle within that regular inflation that the world puts, and which is manageable because that's what many times the inflation is linked. The third consideration you need to keep in mind is that it assumes, and rightfully so, that your money is invested somewhere. So if your $1 million of total net assets is all stashed as cash under a mattress, then probably this rule will fail, because then it does assume that there is going to be some sort of returns on your total investment portfolio. By rule of thumb, it does assume that there is going to be around 70% of the investment in markets, equity markets, while 30% of investments in bonds or very secure assets. Now, you can tweak it and tune it based on saying that, yes, there is also real estate, you also have some gold, you may have certain other cryptos, but overall it assumes that there is 60 to 70% in certain level of moderate to risks, while 30% is in a much lower fixed income risk portfolio. The last point that you have to consider is that this rule has been back-tested for almost 100 years in the US markets. It could be that in certain markets where you are, so for example, if you're listening to this video in India, it has not been back-tested for so many 100 years. It's probably the markets itself are not that stable for the past 100 years in India. So you have to keep that in mind. And it also assumes within the US market, as I mentioned, that there is a certain amount of investments in equities, S&P 500, etc. So it could be that in Nifty in India or Hang Seng in Hong Kong, that it may not have that same level of impact. So these are some of the considerations that you have to keep in mind towards this 4% rule. Now, what would be the magic number that you should be using? My personal recommendation, I would say. In my personal recommendation, I would not go for 4%, though it has been back-tested, it is seen as a safe number. I would suggest to go somewhere between 3 to 4%, because that also makes it a lot more secure for you. And if you are in, I would say, non-US markets in Europe or even in India for that matter, I would even go further conservative, which some people may find a very conservative or a bit too much conservative, somewhere between 2 to 3%, because that is what we are also personally following and being in the 2 to 3%. Because what 2 to 3% also does as a safe withdrawal rate, it not only secures you that you are not left with the running out of money, but you also probably have some money left at the end, hopefully a lot more money left at the end of your lifetime that you can give it to your children. And it also gives you a longer runway. and that make sure that you can think about retiring a lot earlier than probably what I did at before the age of 50. So this is a quick video about what the 4% rule is, what are the considerations that you should keep in mind, and what would be the recommendation in terms of between the 2 to 4% to keep in your mind. Well, feel free to reach out if you have any thoughts or comments about this, either in the comment section or directly to me. I would be happy to have or engage into a dialogue. And do please like, subscribe, and share this video if you found this insightful and interesting. Till the next video, take care and bye-bye from a lovely and sunny San Francisco.